Greetings. Are we live? Hi, my name's Derek Andrews. I'm moderating this session that is bringing together a number of that are predominantly Canadian, but North America wide. It's a slice of the scene, and there's a bunch of copy on the website explaining it and who the people on the screen are. So I suggest you go over there and read that. But first I want to do a brief land acknowledgement. As a white settler, learning how to do land acknowledgements has been part of what, as a white settler and an organizer, I have learned how to do some land acknowledgements. And in the area that I'm based, the Mississauga and the New Credit are the primary Indigenous party, and they have a relationship with the treaty dish with one spoon. I suggest you check out both of those things and learn more about the Indigenous community in where you live, and learn how to do recognize where the First Nations people are in relation to you. So the screen is full of faces, and we want to get to who those people are. And there are 9 networks represented and a couple of associates of people who are key coordinators. We're going to run in an order that is up on the website, as I mentioned a moment ago. And we're going to start with Kerry Clarke. But just to give you a quick overview, we're going to the Western Roots Artistic Directors, the Midwest Consortium, Ontario Presents, North American Presenters, Folk Music Ontario, the Atlantic Presenters Association, Trade Roots, World Roots Network, and a new museums network. So we're going to give the floor to Kerry Clarke, based in Calgary, and she's going to tell you about something called WRAD. And I think I need to click on your screen to make you larger, Kerry. I don't know how to do that.
No one needs that, Derek.
All right. Well, maybe we'll just leave it this way until I figure out the technology.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm one of about 25 members of WRAD. We're an official, unofficial network, and we don't really have... anyway, we're a collective of groups of festivals that came together from the western and the northern part of Canada. We've been running for over 20 years. We call ourselves special and unique since 1999, because the first time we met, we all decided that our festivals were all special and unique. So that was our uniting thing. We were all that. And so we have expanded to include some festivals. It's mostly artistic directors, but there are a few executive directors involved as well. And we've expanded to include some festivals in Ontario that are kind of like-minded in similar format to some of our festivals. So, for instance, Mariposa is part of it, and Hillside, as well as we've even gone into, we had gone into Nova Scotia, and we have the Stan Rogers Festival involved. Basically, we meet annually, although this year might be different, as most people's are. And we talk about artists and booking and block booking, and also because some of the festivals are very small and the artistic directors wear a bunch of hats and some of them are unpaid. Sometimes we talk about board of directors and marketing and staffing and all kinds of other things. And then we share information on a Facebook group and talk about all those things, and sometimes share a lot of jokes, especially when Doug Cox is involved, which he is. Just support each other as much as possible. And partly because of the network, we've helped make some really great tours happen, because we're able to communicate with each other about who's touring, and maybe jointly apply for Canada Council grants. And some of the festivals, although small, play a very key role in the presenting network and in the ecology of the festivals. So that's rad. Like I say, it's unofficial, but we become official when we need to write a letter to help support something like funding for Heritage Canada funding increases, or if there's other issues like that, then we make it look a little more official. And sometimes I call myself the chair, but that's kind of us. It's wonderful. It's invigorating. It's got us all through some tough times at our own festivals, when you're not sure if you can go on, and when you feel like a lot of us here, where you're in a very unique job, you can talk to like-minded colleagues. That's rad. Geography. Yeah, Western Roots Artistic Directors, like I say, it started in the West. Was started by Doug Simpson, who was at the Vancouver Folk Fest at the time, and Phyllis Stenson, who was in Harrison. And they just got a list from Canada Council of all the festivals in the West and thought it'd be fun if people got together. And then it grew from there. So people can get involved with us. We usually want artistic directors to come to a meeting first because we want to have that kind of trust before we start sharing all of our inner secrets. But Derek, Derek's a member too. He's come to some of our meetings and given information about Montreal, and so participates. The membership isn't limited and it's not exclusive, but it's also not completely inclusive either. Does that answer the question? It's a secret society. If you go to our website, we have a member called Trent Morantz, who's a very good writer, and he's at the South Country Fair, and he made up sort of a fake identity for us in history. So we like to have a little bit of cloak and dagger just to be silly, but we actually are pretty functional and help each other out a lot, and I think help artists out as well. So
just to add to Kerry's comments, the geography for those of you who are outside of North America is the province is Manitoba to British Columbia in the Western Canada. We're going to go to David Chavez.
Sorry, and then the north. We went in the north too. So yeah, that's it. Geography. Sorry, that was a good question, Derek, and I went off on that. Enough for me. We're going to Chicago and David Chavez. Hi, David.
Hey, how's it going? My name's David Chavez. I'm coming to you from the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi nations. Also, many other tribes like the Miami, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee and the Sac have made this also their home in the past. Along with my colleague and co-curator, Carlos Tortoledo, I organize and curate the Chicago World Music Festival in September here, which happens annually, and it's one of the oldest and largest free festivals of its kind in the U.S. It's going into its 22nd year. The Midwest Consortium may be a little bit of a misnomer. It's now more of a consortium of world music presenters that's established in about 2004, and consists of anywhere from like 15 to 20 festivals and routing partners that meet annually with the mission of working to collectively share and pool resources in an effort to black book traditional and contemporary artists from abroad during our respective September timeframes of our festivals. And the primary focus is really just to help artists that need longer lead times, that have bigger barriers to touring the US, like visa processing and things like that, sort of come to market. And so it's more of a collective effort than it is a formal organization. So it's not really like a apply for membership kind of thing. And it's, but there is a structure to the process of our work, and it's not, I think it's a unique model, and Derek has been to it before. And some of the members that are part of this have been the Madison World Music Festival, Lotus World Music Festival in Bloomington, Indiana, Boston University Global Music Festival, Globalfest in Albuquerque, New Mexico, World Music Institute, Small World Festival, Old Town School of Folk Music here in Chicago, Global Roots in Minneapolis. We have a lot of Canadian representation now with the Ashkenaz Festival, Pop Montreal, and the Midwest, the Arts Midwest World Festival is sort of a part of our crew also. Cleveland Museum of Art is also participated in the past, and a variety of other members. So it is becoming less of a Midwest thing and more of a nationwide and North American collective effort, which I think is just speaks to the need of this kind of process to take place to help more and more bring artists into North America.
David, can you mention the World Music Month briefly before we go to Judy Harkel?
Sure. So, because of COVID, in response to it, a lot of festivals obviously are challenged with how do you move forward? How do you produce a festival if you can in this time? And so we have collectively brainstormed the idea of a Global Music Month to take place roughly in September, a little bit end of August, a little bit of beginning of October, just to sort of highlight this collaboration in North America and highlight some of the festivals, all of the festivals really that are participating in this process annually. And so it's a good way for us to both still support artists, still bring light to the fact that, there's a need for presenting international work on a national scale, and a way for people around the country to get to know a lot of the festivals that are doing this work that may not, they may not be able to get to for one reason or another. They may be across the country or, for whatever reason. So it's something that's developing. It's in the works. And I think soon we'll have some announcements about that, but it's an interesting experiment for sure. And we're really happy and excited to be working on it with, a lot of really smart people.
Thanks, David. We'll come back and talk about block booking on the second round and get into the nitty gritty of that. But we are delighted to have Judy Harkel joining us from Ontario Presents, Director of Programming and a highly respected organizer in this part of the world and worldwide. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Derek. Thanks for this, everyone. And I'm really happy to be joined today with all of you for this important conversation. So I'm coming to you today from Toronto, which is the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And as always, I want to pay my respects and thank them for their careful stewardship of the land that I live on, that I call home, and that I find so beautiful. So I am the Director of Programs at Ontario Presents, as Derek indicated. Ontario Presents is a provincial service organization, I guess, or network of presenters, artists, agents, managers, essentially all of the core components comprises the presenting field. Ontario Presents is probably, it's in its 30th year. It has over 100 members. Many of them are presenters, both in the professional sector, but also in the volunteer community-based part of the sector. And we run a number of different programs. We've got a very active block booking program, which Derek indicated, and we'll get to that later. But we also run curatorial development programs for work like contemporary dance and contemporary theater. We have an annual conference, which Cheryl Ewing is on the call as well, and I'm going to let her speak to that in half a second. But our goal really is to animate the presenting community and to provide services to our members to allow them to do the work that they do best, which is bringing wonderful artists and artistic organizations to their facilities. So it's a great organization. I'm happy to be affiliated with them, and I'll pass it over to Cheryl.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Derek, for having us as part of this. So Ontario Presents has been running an annual conference for some years. We are in the process of going through a transition. Traditionally, historically, Ontario Contact will showcase anywhere from 25 to 35 artists. We do pitches that 5-minute pitches that will involve about 40 artists. We have the traditional trade show floor, Ontario Contact. We really are working hard to make sure that our presenters, agents, the artists, the managers are seeing themselves as a single sector and working together. We're currently going through a transition. 2020 was going to be our final year of Ontario Contact. In 2021, we're moving to an approach where we're going to have 2 very different conferences alternating years. The first year will be Contact on Tour. It will be going into communities, likely smaller communities, with the intention of in those communities to help build both the presenting sector as well as the artist side. So providing professional development, workshops, etc., is appropriate. Working closely with the host community to identify potential new presenters or people to join their committee, and as well as artists that they feel have an opportunity, have the ability, or maybe are interested in exploring the world of touring. The alternate years that conference will be in the GTA, and its focus is still to be determined. Our delegates are probably about 2/3 of them are volunteer presenters. So they find this annual conference really critical for them. For those, for instance, who are in Northern Ontario, bordering Winnipeg, the only time they get to see artists are when they're at the conference. The other third are, most of those are probably municipally owned venues, but even within that, we do have some that are run by community members. And we're basically looking at a house size of 160 up to 1,200 attending the conference.
Super. Thank you, Cheryl. That's breaking news for some of what you just said there for those of us in Ontario. And for folks who are dialing in from outside of North America, Ontario is the largest province in Canada, and as a presenting network, it's a very robust network. And the reference to GTA is Greater Toronto Area for people who haven't heard that term before. 5 million people living in this zone. There is a bunch of information on the Ontario Presents website, and that link, I believe, is on the information provided in the brochure and in the schedule. We're going to New York now, and or somewhere near New York, and Isabel Sopher, a veteran presenter from, and one of the key drivers of the North America Presents, another less formal ad hoc group. But Isabel, let's talk about that network, please.
Yes, hi everybody, and it's really great to be part of Global Toronto, and thank you, Derek. I am here on the Mohican and Munsee land along the Hudson River in Saugerties, New York, the Hudson Valley area, which I have relocated to a couple of years ago from New York City. The North American Presenters group is an informal network of presenters, primarily artistic directors, although there are some executive directors in the group as well. It came about 20 some odd years ago, I believe, through a conversation between Bill Bragan and Derek, and has morphed over time. It was really intended originally to be a confidential gathering point for presenters that had a specific focus or interest in international music traditions. And that's sort of the vein that ties the participants together that are on the North American Presenters network. And while the presenters that participate are throughout the US and Canada, there's about 100 of us that participate to various degrees. We've tried to keep it geographically and really as geographically, I suppose, diverse as we can. The idea is really to have conversations about issues, relevant issues in the field. It's a great way for all of the participants to be together, to share information, to talk about issues, including best practices. We have, one of the things that happened during the COVID time is that we regrouped as a Zoom group. And this became, I think, one of the earlier groups to gather as a group outside of sort of the bigger, more formal institutions that were kind of gathering people together, like the Arts Presenters Conference or Americans for the Arts. I'm kind of US-centric, my apologies for that. just not as aware of what's happening in our northern neighbors. But, really just trying to get together and see how the hell we were going to handle the devastation that we were facing through COVID-19. And so we do really some deep dives into some pretty deep conversations. Some of them are very practical, like around virtual programming. Some of them are, very supportive. We have special guests on our network. We have been doing a deep dive around racial and social justice issues, bringing in people to help us work through these issues, which is an ongoing component to NA Presenters. The NA Presenters is by invitation, and we do that to just be sure that people are committed to international programming. Of course, you can imagine the issues that many of us are facing now with visas and quarantines and crossing borders. So these are all sort of parts of our conversations. And one of the things I think that happened through the NA Presenters is that other groups have emerged that, are based sort of, like around this, what we're all kind of facing. So we've seen other kind of consortia develop along this model of NA Presenters. We're also very informal, so there's nothing that we do together, although we have these types of conversations, but I think generally we feel that the very open-ended nature and confidential nature of the group ties us all together and keeps it sort of what it is, which is just an important place for people to be together. Derek, do you have anything to add?
Well, maybe just a quick comment about your work, Isabel. I met you first when you were at the World Music Institute, and as an organizer, I guess you've done most of your work in New York City?
Yeah, most of it. I do work across the country primarily, but I've been in the kind of forefront of presenting international music for the last 3 decades. I am co-founder and co-director of Globalfest with Bill Bragan and Shanta Thake in New York, and have another organization called Live Sounds that produces festivals, public programs, and other events here in New York and across the country. I was really just for the first time involved in programming up where I am now in the Hudson Valley this summer, which of course was all canceled. But I do collaborate with cultural institutions on projects. I'm, a born collaborator, and that's really what I really love to do, like you all.
And you mentioned Globalfest, which is an event that some people dialed in may be aware of, that's been taking place during APAP, the conference in New York City in January. Any news on Globalfest in the new year?
We are in the curatorial stage right now. We've actually are making some pretty good headway there. We have not made a decision about what Globalfest is going to look like, whether it'll be a hybrid model, whether it'll be a virtual model. We just haven't decided yet. But we do have some pretty exciting news that we'll be announcing relatively soon about some collaborators for this year, Globalfest, as well as the Wavelengths Conference, which we hold each year. We will be having the Wavelengths Conference, which typically takes place during the Arts Presenters Conference in New York City in January. And we have about 600 participants in the Wavelengths Conference each year. This year, that will be virtual. I don't know whether there's going to be a live component, but I don't think so. We're really looking at the Global Toronto's model for that. It's really been inspirational. And as well, a Globalfest Artist Award ceremony that we host each year.
Thanks so much. We might come back to some of that stuff, and as we welcome from Ottawa, Ontario, Alka Sharma from what used to be called the Ontario Council of Folk Festivals and now called Folk Music Ontario. Alka, welcome to the session.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks for having me. And our office is based out of Ottawa, as Derek had mentioned, which is the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. And so that's where our office is located. And Folk Music Ontario we were going into our 34th conference this coming September. But unfortunately, of course, we had to pivot, as most organizations have had to do. So we've decided to do some year-round online programming for this upcoming year. But what we normally do at our conference is we have showcasing opportunities for artists that can apply to our official showcases, which is about 36 slots. And then we do have showcasing opportunities that are in hotel rooms that are called private showcases. And of course, then we also have sponsored showcases. We do bring in international delegates for our export development program, where we set up the delegates to have one-on-one conversations with the artists that are officially showcasing. And then other artists can also apply to partake in those sessions as well. And at the conference, we also have various panels and workshops for professional development. And our members are mainly consisting of festivals across Ontario, organizations and individuals. And so with the festivals, we do hold a yearly festivals retreat as well, where we just get everyone together and where they can share information. But we also have professional development panels and workshops that happen over the weekend. And it's a really good learning tool, but also there's a lot of camaraderie that exists, which is kind of fun. But overall, our conference, we usually have between 500 to 800 people at the conference at different years. And that's mainly what it's about. And so in terms of our year-round programming, we had a webinar back in July, just about how to stream properly for artists. And then this upcoming month in August, we do have, back in July, we're actually still in July, I'm just realizing as I'm talking. But then in August, we have our second webinar coming up where we're looking at how artists can actually do sort of like a house concert, an online house concert. So we're working with Home Roots and based out of Manitoba, and then a couple of artists as well. And then we've got some more webinars coming up for the other months. And that's what we're trying to do now, and just try and also provide showcasing opportunities at some point for the artists that have applied to our conference.
So I inadvertently just sent a note to one of our other folks asking you a question, Alka, on an update regarding the merger of Folk Music Canada and Canadian Folk Music Awards that was discussed at the last conference.
Yeah, we're still in that process. That's a good question. And so in case people don't know, there is Folk Music Canada, there's Folk Music Ontario, and then there's the Canadian Folk Music Awards. And we've been also in discussions with Folk Alliance International, which is based out of Kansas City, Missouri. And the plan is to amalgamate mainly the three organizations that I mentioned, the Canadian organizations, to become one big sort of national organization. So we've hired a consultant, and that consultant has made some recommendations, which we are moving forward with in the next month, actually. So you probably will hear some news in like the next, I want to say 2 months, where we will be letting everyone know what kind of things we're going to do moving forward. And it is happening. So we are moving it forward, but I'll have more news in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Alka. I'll just comment, having been a board member of the organization and worked around the semantics of the word folk, for example, it's a very broad mandate that is spanning lots of genres of music. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but just for those outside of North America in particular, the definition of folk is really varies and has evolved. And maybe you want to touch on that for a second.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many opinions as to what folk really means. I can give you my personal opinion as to what I think it is. And to me, that's more about like music of the people. So I would even consider like punk rock and hip hop to be in that type of genre, as it started like, you know, with rebellion and music of the people, as does the international global aspect of music. And I don't use the term world music. I use more like a term of global music, because global music in itself can be considered folk music. So there are various discussions, but then there are also like a lot of the traditionalists that feel that folk music is like strictly maybe Celtic, or strictly, you know, comes from England, or, you know, or it could be just strictly protest music. But so there are different ways to look at it. I have given you what I think of it, but like it is such a broad term. So I do feel though that even music that comes from rural Africa, that's traditional folk music. And so that's what I would say sort of encompasses folk. It's such a broad term.
Well, and in some of the other sessions, the semantics of music genres has come up, and I pointed people to the Folk Roots magazine archive that Ian Anderson has kept about the history of the term. But we're not going there today. We are going to networks, and thank you, Alka.
Thank you.
We're going to Halifax, Nova Scotia. Laurie Gillis from the Atlantic Presenters Association. Not dissimilar to Ontario Contact in your structure, but delighted to have you here, Laurie. Looking good. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Derek. I also have my colleague, Valerie Hillier, with us, and she'll kind of focus on the block booking side of things. But the Atlantic Presenters Network has members across the ancestral and unceded territories of several Indigenous peoples: the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoqiyik, Passamaquoddy, the Beothuk, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatsiavut, and the Innu of Nitassisin. So that's New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Prince Edward Island. So the eastern edge of Canada, for those of you outside of the country. Our network is made up of just over 100 multidisciplinary presenters, and that includes festivals, theaters, community, volunteer presenters. And I would say about 30 to 40 of those members are actively engaged in our block booking within our network. But we provide a variety of services to the membership, including workshops throughout the year. We do things online as well as in person in normal times. And block booking is another thing we do. Much like Ontario Presents, we have a curatorial program in contemporary dance. But our marquee events we have two conferences that we host. So as I said, in normal times, we offer Shift Change, which is a 3-day conference primarily for festival presenters. Currently, that event does not have any showcasing opportunities. It focuses more on professional development and networking opportunities amongst presenters. And it is in its infancy. So we hosted our 4th event in February of this past year in 2020 in Halifax. And it is an annual event. We're not quite sure what that will look like in 2021. We're crossing our fingers we can do it in person, but we've got a few plan Bs and Cs and Ds in the works for that event. We also host Contact East, which is a showcasing conference, much like Ontario Presents and ELCA at Folk Music Ontario. It's a showcasing conference. We usually have about 10 pitches, 10 artist pitches, and 25 to 27 15-minute showcases. So it's not a massive event that way, but it's quite intense. And our our delegates see every showcase that takes place during the weekend. We host one-to-one meetings, those business meetings between artists, agents, managers, presenters. We have a contact room, which is a trade show like setup. Like Folk Music in Ontario, we also have international delegates that come to our event and participate in all parts of the conference. We host professional development sessions, and we do a lot of networking opportunities, so dinners, lunches, excursions, that sort of thing. So because we cover the 4 Atlantic provinces, that conference moves from each province each year. So we were supposed to be in New Brunswick in September. We are doing a virtual or a digital-ish conference. It'll be much truncated. We're doing a few professional development sessions, and we're also going to try to host a few networking sessions through Zoom. We'll see how that goes, and I can report back to anyone who's interested. But in 2021, we'll be in Moncton, New Brunswick, at the beautiful Capitol Theatre there. And in 2022, we'll see us in Halifax at the lovely Neptune Theatre, who will be our host there. So those fingers crossed on both of those events. But and we do move to different cities too. We don't always host in the same city in each province, but we try to move around and expose our members to different member venues in each province. So,
thank you, Laurie. And again, just for those outside of North America, the provinces that we're referring to here, you mentioned New Brunswick. You're in Halifax. Prince Edward Island is in the mix, and Newfoundland, Labrador. The 4 provinces, is that correct?
4 provinces. Yep, that's correct. Yeah. So it's fun. It's fun when you're dealing with 4 different provincial governments and all that kind of stuff. Especially in these times.
We're going to hear from Valerie about the block booking, who's with us and working with Atlantic Presenters Association, and the outcomes from Contact East. That's our East, and we'll be hearing from Laurie again in a moment. Here's Michael Owen, who's in Toronto and with a new network. Some of you might have met Michael when he's playing his bass in the Battle of Santiago, but he's going to tell you about a nascent network and project that he's developing. Welcome, Michael. You're muted. Whoop.
Yes,
there we go.
Thank you for having me. So yes, I am in Toronto on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Mississauga of the Credit. I'm also, as Derek mentioned, I'm the new guy on the block here. So I'm a recent founder of a presenting organization called Trade Routes, and Derek's invited me here to talk about the cross-border presenting network that we are working on developing. The goals of this network is to support presenters and agents to present artists. We will assist with information sharing between presenters to enable more cooperation going over the Canadian and US border. We hope to achieve this with a digital database that we would populate and maintain with confirmed, tentative, and speculative concert dates from the presenters who join the network. We hope each presenter will have access to the database with the opportunity to search for concerts and artists they might like to program with a robust search feature to, sort of filter by date, genre, and performance type, that sort of thing. We would further support this initiative by doing various meetings throughout the year to go through the artist review and voting process. And this would help enable some cooperation with some actionable outcomes for the upcoming touring cycle. And so this is actually not dissimilar to David's network, just a little bit wider of a scope, going all year, and of course going over the border just like they are. So we are new, so we're hoping to attract North American and Canadian presenters into this sort of developing network, and I'm glad to be a part of this. Thank you, Derek. I'm interested to learn from everyone and to get those best practices, and so that we can develop a good cross-border sort of process to help with successful shows and tours for artists and presenters alike.
Well, we want to learn from you and your new approaches, Michael, because the veterans have been doing it for a while, and they're always adapting, as we're hearing in this session. And we'll come back to you in a moment as we do the sort of second round. But I have to click on something here. Oh goodness, pin video. There we go. Sorry, I'm having to manage the technology in my screen, so I'm a little distracted every now and then. For those who don't know my work, I was at Harbourfront Centre for 20 years organizing concerts and the summer festival programs, did 5 WRAD festivals there. Did a gig at Luminato Festival. I do artist management consulting, and I am an admitted conference junkie. So I am traveling often to conferences around the world, and have had an interest in this session as one of the architects of Global Toronto itself. We did an edition of Global Toronto that had 10 buyers come in, and that people loved discovering Toronto and discovering the artists here, and we're very pleased with how things are going so far midway. But the hat I'm wearing regarding the World Roots Network is associated with a Montreal event called Mondial Montreal, and I'm the artistic director there. We're in our 9th year, and I went to work with people in Quebec, in Montreal, just because it seemed like a good idea, and I had a friendly partner in Sebastian Nazra, who is the brains behind M for Montreal and another event called The Hub. We've been running Mondial in November every year. Did I mention 9 editions? Our 10th edition was supposed to happen in November. And like everybody else, we are pivoting and trying to find out what we're going to do instead of the physical event, because people just cannot travel, and they can't assemble to appreciate a conference. Mondial has been pretty successful as a forum for what I still call world music, but the width of my definition has gone from Tribe Called Red to Ottawa Valley Fiddlers. The showcases in that event have featured about 30 acts, but more importantly, the presenter meetings that we've had has developed into an ad hoc network called World Roots Network. And the primary gathering of that network is in November at Mondial. There are occasional meetings elsewhere at other conferences. We've met at Folk Alliance this past year in New Orleans, at APAP, at WOMEX. We've taken delegations out to Babel Med in Marseille. And the network is really an affinity group, like many of the other networks you're hearing from today. The common ground is international artists and genres of music that really need to be supported. It is music specific. It's not a performing arts meeting. It's coincided with a big Montreal-based performing arts meeting called CNARS. And M for Montreal also takes place. That week in Montreal is a little crazy. There's also a film event and a technology event. You want to come. But the network involves a wide range of types of presenters, not dissimilar to what we've been hearing so far, in that the summer festivals in Canada, which is quite a robust phenomena, are taking part, and the performing arts centers, municipal presenters is a very strong network of Montreal-based, what used to be called, I've forgotten the name. Access Culture is the new name. Maison de Culture. There's a network in Montreal of about 25 of those. But we are bringing all those people together to find their common ground. And the private and confidential meetings that take place during Mondial Montreal have produced breakout groups. And we are on the verge of formalizing that. And I've consulted with several of the people here to figure out what method we will use to move forward to block booking. And I'm not going to get into that right now, but I will mention, just for those participants to this session, you're hearing the phrase block booking over and over again. And I'll just mention a brief definition in that when presenters cooperate with each other and find a way to make a tour happen, there are a block of people who assemble, and you're going to hear the details of that in a moment when we go back around. That's in the World Roots Network. The breakout groups have been driven so far by what part of the calendar you are in, and then what part of the geography you're in. And our delegates have ranged from European, American, and Canadian participants. And there's usually about 60 folks at those private meetings in November. But what we do next is remains to be seen, and we'll talk a bit more about that in this session. But I'm going to give the mic to a late addition to the session. I don't think we got Tom Welsh written up because he's the breaking news in this session, based in Cleveland. Let me just get you set up here. Tom, welcome from Cleveland and from the Museum of Fine Art. Is that the building from which you work?
Thanks, Derek. Yes, I'm the Director of Performing Arts at the Cleveland Museum of Art, here on the shores of Lake Erie, traditional home of the Erie and Hopewell, among others. And I'm grateful to be the late addition, sneaking in under the wire. One of my quarantine projects is to pull together the group that has never been together before, which is people like me who are concert presenters, performing arts presenters who live inside of visual arts museums. So, for example, the Cleveland Museum of Art is one of the great, heavy, old encyclopedic museums in the United States, going back to 1916, and it's probably the first of all the museums in the U.S. that's always had a curatorial position called Curator of Music, or now Director of Performing Arts. And there are a good handful of art museums across the United States and North America who have concert presenters inside the walls, though we've never really, and we sort of know each other and keep in touch, but we've never really assembled in a meaningful way. So inspired in part by some of the groups that are represented here today and in which I participate otherwise, I decided, working from home, it's time to pull this group together. So we've informally adopted the name Museum Presenters. It's still coming into focus, and for frame of reference, the 10 or so of us who've jumped into conversation include museums that you might recognize, including the Getty in Los Angeles, the Met in New York, MFA Boston, National Gallery and Smithsonian, Library of Congress, all in DC, the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. More will be coming, but these are organizations that have had a long-standing and a high-level commitment to performing arts inside of visual arts museums. Inspired in part because when we individually turn up at different conferences or gatherings, whether it's APAP or even our Midwest Consortium, as David pointed out, as a concert programmer inside of an art museum, we're a little bit kind of on the fringes of most of those conversations because of our remit is a little different. We're often organized around the curatorial division, interacting with the exhibitions that are either coming into or being generated by our museums, and so on. So in some cases, we often feel like neither fish nor fowl when we're showing up in different groups. And so this is the genesis of trying to get a conversation going through museum presenters. And in my location here in what we call Northeast Ohio, as it happens, we're wearing many different hats because we are, on the one hand, a fine arts institution, and all of that entails with chamber music and commissioning new works from composers and so on. But we're also the premier presenter for world music and these global music traditions that we often talk about. There is no other venue really within 150 miles of where we are for the top level touring artists coming through from outside the United States. So wearing a lot of different hats based on our goals and responsibilities within our communities as a longstanding organization. I expect our new group, which is, as I mentioned, still coming into focus, will grow as we find and identify and invite more people to join our conversation. Thanks for having me.
Tom, I'm curious, Torontonians would be interested to know if there's any cross-border activity. Would the Art Gallery of Ontario be a potential ally, or are you looking to cross the border?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. As I say, we're scheduled for our second meeting only this week, so we'll grow quickly. And we've had separate and related conversations about how Toronto and Cleveland are, in fact, geographic neighbors. So we're in a network in the sense that we get to the conversation about block booking, how that works. There's a border between us, but we're actually rather close to each other. So there's every reason to think about what we're doing, not only organizationally and the portfolios of each of these museums, but regionally and geographically as well.
Thank you. And we're now going to dig in. I need to get Kerry's mic going because I don't know who unmutes her. Oh, she's unmuted. We're back in Calgary, and I might just ask some questions because I'm kind of familiar with everybody's work. But block booking, as I began to explain, is an outcome of the networks and the affinity that people have. Kerry, I think you offered that there isn't a formal process, but I've seen work at your meetings where a cluster of the members will actually start talking about tours and deals and finances of those matters. Can you comment on to what degree that's a priority for Western Roots artistic directors?
Yeah, I think it's part of what we like to do. Sometimes it's become a little bit of a sideline just because sometimes it's hard to, you're dealing with different months. People are touring in different realities for festivals. But I think we also are starting more and more to share information about what artists might be available, like looking at, for instance, Indigenous artists in Canada and making really good lists of who's available to us, and just sharing information like that as much as we're doing block booking. Other block booking kind of happens depending on people's interests. So sometimes we'll put out information about an artist tour that's happening and people will hop on, and then we'll do kind of side conversations to try and make a tour happen. So that's kind of what we've done with RAD. As you know, Derek, we used to have a block booking meetings between some of the larger Canadian festivals that were quite effective, but we haven't done that for a long time. So I think it's a matter of trying to focus well on it, and sometimes we do it well, sometimes we don't. And like I said, it's sometimes with, we have the ability to apply for Canada Council grants. So whoever applies for that grant often becomes almost like the de facto agent, because some of the artists we're working with are international global artists and they don't necessarily have Canadian representation. So I've become kind of the Mexico go-to person, and some of the other, Chris Freyer will maybe when you're, after going to the conference in Korea, he had a group that we were interested in from Korea. So he became kind of the lead on that. So you become almost like the block booking coordinator / pseudo agent. And that's happened a fair amount. I mean, Derek, we've done things like Rokia Traore. That wasn't necessarily RAD, but I think it's international artists, but also just trying to really, sometimes someone's a booster for a certain Canadian artist. We try and make that happen. To replace agents or work with some. It depends. Sometimes we'll come back from a conference and someone like Todd Jordan from Pecan will have been there, and if he notices enough interest from the festivals that he's used to working with, in our network, our festivals like Winnipeg Folk and Winnipeg, Vancouver, us, and a bunch of wonderful small festivals. So if he notices some interest, sometimes we can get someone like Todd Jordan to sort of take on the reins after we've made the initial conversations, and sometimes we just are working with somebody from that country, like an Alejandro Polinas, and becoming sort of doing agenting work and helping with the grant and some of the travel and some logistics.
Kerry, we're revealing some secrets here today, and you made reference to a process that I recall starting up way back in the 90s. It was actually triggered by Gary Crystal when he was at the Canada Council, and just to explain to anybody who's hearing about this, there is a Canada Council grant to support international artists coming into Canada, and it's so if you have 3 to 5 festivals or whatever it is that Kerry's just explained that land at, and I'll just explain for those not familiar with the agency she mentioned, Todd Jordan is at PACAN agency based in Winnipeg, and they have an office in Toronto as well. PAQUIN, PACAN, check it out. They got a great roster, and he's a great agent. And I'm sure he has been the lead on one of those Canada Council grant applications that offset tour expenses. And you're saying that is still an active thing, Kerry?
Yep, and the key thing for people from outside Canada is the application has to be submitted by a Canadian. So you have to find a champion. Somebody from the other country can do a lot of the grant work, but it has to be submitted by a Canadian individual or Canadian organization, and then the money flows through that organization. I think it just must be alongside Revenue Canada or other rules. So yeah, that's still happened. I've done a number of grants in recent years, and some other people have. Sandra Boutel, who used to be at Regina, did a couple grants, and it's still a thing, and it's happened. And there have been some very good tours, Los Muñequitos de Matanzas and African artists, the odd American artists, but it's happened, and it helps support basically what the grant's for. In the best case scenario, when you receive it, is it's meant to help cover the cost of traveling within Canada, from province to province, and costs on the road between festivals. So it doesn't cover costs of flying from the country of origin to Canada, but in the best case scenario, when you get the money you want, it covers the cost of between festivals. So it can be really helpful. It's not a golden ticket. Canada's still a huge country to travel in, and the times between festivals, the 3 or 4 days between festivals, can be sometimes really hard to fill. And we try and do our best to help find those, but sometimes you have some days off to hang and chill.
We're going to go to David Chavez now, and a block booking process that I've been researching and I've been impressed with, because it is more structured, not quite as sophisticated as the 2 performing arts organizations that are with us today, but I guess the city of Chicago has provided the lead on that. You and Carlos Tortolero, and does it go back to the Mike Orlov era of the Chicago World Music Festival, David?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is something that started before me, and that Mike Orlov was certainly part of starting that, along with Brian Keir, who was at the department then and is now at World Music Institute and doing the Boston University Global Music Festival. So we didn't in any way start this, but we're just sort of carrying on the tradition and trying to improve the process, as it evolves. So yeah, it's like I said, it's not very sophisticated, but there is some structure to it, and somehow it ends up working in our favor. So we're, happy about that.
So let's talk about the process a little bit, just because there used to be a January meeting that's moved up to December, and I guess people kind of bring forward their ideas, and then there's a collective process to make the decisions.
Yeah, so pretty much the way it works is, those that are participating, that participate with us in this process every year. We have met annually in January. That's moved over to December because, as we've all experienced in the U.S., like a lot of the visa processing is taking much longer now due to, very xenophobic administration and delays and a lot of hurdles. And so we're trying to meet earlier so that we can get a larger head start on getting some of these things through in time. And it's really as basic as us sharing a spreadsheet where every participant, participating festival or presenter adds or suggests a group of artists or various artists that they intend to make an offer to, that they're really interested in advocating for. And you're limited to the actual number of artists that you actually present. So if you're a presenter that only produces one event with one artist, you can only really put forth one artist, right? If you have many opportunities for presenting artists, then you have that many suggestions you can make, roughly. What happens is everyone sort of adds their suggestions. They communicate with the artist or agent in advance to get very specific information about, if they're interested, what their fees are, the number of people in the group, any other marketing assets, things like that, special notes on potential funding or support from their home country or export office, things like that. And then as a group, we meet and we review it could be between 60 and 80 groups as a group. And we go through them and we sort of make notes and discuss artistic merit. We discuss marketability. We discuss preparedness sometimes. We discuss how they, relate to other artists that are being considered as well, and also individual markets that they're going to be sort of like invited to perform in, and whether or not it makes sense. And so, no one is necessarily tied to all the artists on this list, but if you put forth and adopt an artist, then it's understood that you are the one that is like going to be making a significant offer to make that tour happen. And because we're sort of spread out across the month of September, Chicago is, 3 long weekends to be a better partner with our regional participants. Sorry, there's all of a sudden construction happening across the street from me. But it's a spreadsheet. We review things, we vote on it, and then about 15 to 20 artists sort of get moved on to the next phase where they're reached out to about consideration for bookings. We work with artists directly. In some cases, we connect artists with agents if they don't have U.S. agents, because we find that that's an easier way to sort of develop an actual tour in the U.S. is working with people that know the markets here. So that's how it really works.
Great. I'm not seeing any questions coming in from the participants, and I would love to know if the chat is open. We're going to move from David in Chicago to Judy Harkill, Toronto. I guess you've been coordinating block booking process for quite some time. I mean, you are revered in the world of coordinating these a lot of tours, and I guess you can just tell us how that works here in Ontario. And were you involved also in the I Want to Showcase software or any other block booking software that I've heard about?
Yes, I'm not sure, reverence is the right way to call it, frankly. But I have been doing this for almost 20 years. I started working with this group of presenters in Ontario that were umbrellaed under Ontario Presents, simply because as a group of presenters, and many of them were venue presenters in municipal shops, what they realized was a lot of them were, fairly close by to each other. A lot of times they were trying to engage with the same artist, and they found that, in effect, they were, often competing against each other, which made absolutely no sense at all. And it just seemed more sensible for them to start working together to try and be more efficient in the way they could offer work to artists, to also essentially kind of gang up on engagements so that they could go after an artist perhaps that, wouldn't look at one engagement from this region, but may very well look at, 5 or 6 engagements. It was also a recognition that artists, could use some help in getting better routed tours that were, solidly put together. So there were a number of reasons why they came together as a group in the first place. And we've been now doing this for 20 years. We have software. We developed a program I want to say the first iteration of the program came into effect 15 or 16 years ago. And essentially it was simply because what started out as a small project became quite big, quite fast. And I just couldn't manage it, you know, on paper anymore. And so we developed one iteration of what this block booking program looked like. And then it quickly became outdated, and we enhanced it, and the current size is old. We've just taken 6 months to do a fairly large sectoral consult on reimagining what this software would look like. Because right now the software is really developed for use by presenters and presenters only. And we do actually allow it or give it to other organizations to use. Atlantic Presenters uses it for their block booking in Atlantic Canada. But what we wanted to do was to make it more, functionality, obviously, from 10 years ago today, you know, has rapidly changed, and there's so much more the site could do for us. And it's clunky now. I mean, it's still usable and it still works, but you know, it needs to be upgraded. And what we also want to do is give greater access to agents and artists and managers so they can actually watch. They can actually view what's happening with their artists as tours are being developed, and they can help us by providing information on a more timely basis. But right now, the system essentially collects information on an artist. The presenters have access to all of this information. There's technical riders and contract information, and it is all stored. We, as a group of presenters, meet on the telephone every second Wednesday for 2.5 hours. And the purpose of that, those meetings are really to discuss work, to discuss what people are interested in presenting. Because the thing that is, you know, that's really important to recognize is software is just software. It's a machine. Without the interconnectedness of this group of highly collaborative people who work together and who want to build effective tours for artists, it wouldn't be useful. And so starting, I'd say, around the beginning of September, we start meeting every second Wednesday, and people bring projects to the table, and we discuss work. And when there seems to be enough interest in a particular artist, we'll activate the software, as it were, allow for dates to be input, and then I will manage the process of routing the tour and figuring out the logistics so that the artist, or agent, when receiving an offer from us, gets a fairly well thought out and developed tour routing. So a lot of that work is taken directly away from the artist and or agent, which is also beneficial to them as well, I guess. So yeah, that's a bit in a nutshell how the software works. There is something called I Want to Showcase, but that's actually the showcasing software that's used for showcase selection for all of the various contact events in Canada, and I believe in the United States as well. So yeah, that's,
Judy, there's a couple of questions that have
so you're asking
and we were talking on top of each other there.
An artist development system that allows emerging artists to make their way up the rungs.
You seen that?
Sorry, I didn't get that. Talent development. So the thing is, these presenters, so I'd say there's about 30 of them that actively program together. And it ranges from venues that have 250 seats all the way up to 1,500 seats. And there are some presenters who have multiple halls, so they're programming for small venues and large venues. And it really is about their wishes and what they are interested in programming or presenting. We probably last year did about 50 44 or 55 tours. But I mean, some presenters will book, 6 or 7 shows a year through the system. Some will book 30. But the people who are booking 30 are probably booking another 70 on their own. So, everybody there are some projects that are going to be consistent through the system or through the network, but then there's a whole lot of additional programming that goes on as well. And because there are so many people involved in the projects, it does mean that there's a chance for everybody to get something, and it's not an oversaturation of the market. So how it works is presenters, get information from artists, and they look at this information. They go or they attend conferences. We do a lot of as much as possible. We try and do a number of group conferences that we go to where people will go to showcases, meet with artists, meet with agents. And people see a lot of performances. And what will happen is, because we try and work collaboratively and collectively, we've got a dance curatorial program, for instance, and one on contemporary theater. And so what we try and do is divide out the opportunities so as many people as possible can try and see as many different shows as possible. And then we come back in and report on what that is and share information and press material. And so there is, and it's not all, headlining performances. Certainly, we have a component of what we do, which always includes emerging artists, companies from perhaps other parts of the world. So it really is about finding a presenter within the network to champion your work and bring it forward. And we are, we were open to all of that activity happening.
I wanted to get Cheryl in just to give a little more information on the I Want to Showcase software, and she's disappeared on my screen. Where did Cheryl go?
I'm still here, Derek. It was developed a little over a dozen years ago with Contact East and Ontario Contact, both of whom were reviewing our application process and decided to work together, and have been so successful with it that most of the regional presenting networks in North America are on board. One of the things that's fascinating about it, I think, is it's very easy for an artist or an agent to apply to multiple showcases with the same artist. And there's been a lot of similarity, I would say, between Contact East and Ontario Contact, but when it goes through the whole process, jury process, our showcases are actually very different, which is fascinating, but also indicates to me that it works well because we're able to find artists that fit for our markets. We have, certainly in Ontario, we do have international applications, and we have frequently had an international artist showcase as a result. For our artist development, you're asking about that. As part of Ontario Contact, we've been doing specific artist development towards touring, giving information about how to cross the border or even how to travel through, say, Northern Ontario, because you can't just travel with a GPS. I've done a tour where we must have had 6 different servers and none of us were able to get any service at that time, so maps essential. So that training goes from that to something that's more specific to touring internationally.
Thanks. I want to stay. There's several questions that have come in regarding access, and Isabel, Globalfest has been a talent development program and a lot of discovery. I think discovery is a big part of the block booking process. It amortizes tour costs, as Kerry was explaining, when there's a grant and coordination of a budget. But Globalfest has become known for helping develop new artists into the various markets that attend. Whoops.
Yes, sorry. Yes, Globalfest is really an industry event that has, Globalfest is an organization that has different programs, and our main program is our January festival, which takes place during the Arts Presenters Conference in New York City. And during that conference time, there's about 40,000 people who come to New York for thousands, literally thousands of showcases that are happening. And now not only showcases, but also festivals that are happening. These festivals range from dance events to theater events, to opera, to jazz. So there really is this huge range of events that take place during this unique time period in January in New York. And what Globalfest is the first festival that decided to take place during this key time where so many decision makers and industry professionals were going to be in one place at the same time. And so our goal was to create an event that would take place while all these people are here, take the showcase model outside of the hotel room and put it into sort of a real life scenario. So we create 3 distinct stages over one night with 12 artists so that the audience can discover 12 different artists, can see all 12 different artists on the same night. And because it's an industry event, and this is how I kind of see it tying into block booking, because it's an industry event, our goal is to get these artists to tour around the world with a focus on North America, but really people participate in Globalfest from all over the world. And we see artists from Globalfest performing all over the world. So our mission is to push international music into the center of the performing arts field as a whole. And in particular, in the USA, that's, really something that is not, it really needs help. So
you guys also have a tour subsidy program that, it kind of replaces government funding, I guess, or maybe you can explain how that has worked.
Sure. So the artists that we bring to Globalfest are artists that have the infrastructure to tour, and I'll just finish off there. So the artists that we're presenting on our stages are tour ready artists, and have a very high success rate of participating in Globalfest and then going on the road. In addition to Globalfest's programs, besides our festival, we also have a touring fund. The touring fund is currently unfunded. We are hoping to have it refunded, but we've given over $100,000 to, I think it's 75 groups. And because there's really no money in our field, in the industry, Globalfest realized that this was one of the areas that would have the biggest sort of influence and impact on our mission. So we have a granting program. It's a very simple program that alumni artists can apply for after they've participated in Globalfest, can apply for up to $4,000 to reach new markets in the States. It's been a terrific program. Unfortunately, our funding sunset, but we are looking to reinstate that, especially now, given that there's going to be this very large sort of lag in the market.
Thanks, Isabel. I'm going to ask Alka to jump in about Ontario, and we're seeing your questions coming in, and we're trying to address them. We've got about 20 minutes left to come back to things about access that are coming up from the participants, and we're sharing those questions as a group here. So we're seeing them, and Alka, tell us about the Ontario meeting, and there's a lot of non-Ontario people who come in for FMO too, right?
Yeah, and I believe we have our Ontario Festival's artistic directors, where they, I believe, share information with each other. And because we have the annual festivals retreat, that's where the discussion started happening, where they would talk to each other about the various artists that they have coming in to each of their festivals. And I guess they discuss budget and so forth. And I know that started when we started having the festival's retreat, whereas before I think people were a little bit more, cards to their chest type of thing, where they weren't giving up information. So that's changed a lot, which is great. And because we do have an international delegation that comes in, I think they talk a lot with the artistic directors from the Ontario festivals as well, with the various artists that they see at our conference in order to book them. So we see a lot of that happening with the sort of the networking with each other. And as Kerry mentions in the chat here, like a lot, there might be an artistic director that sees somebody at a conference or another festival and then promote them to other artistic directors. So that happens a lot at our conference in terms of block booking.
Just to clarify what's happening, those of us in the session have a private chat where we're talking to each other. We're seeing your questions coming forward, and we're going to open up the mic after we've heard from a couple more people explaining their systems. I think, Laurie, are you going to hand it over to Valerie, or how do you want to do this?
Yep, I'll hand it to Val. She's our coordinator on that front.
Hi, Valerie. Where are you in New Brunswick today?
Yes, I'm in Fredericton.
Tell us about what your job is.
So it's very much like what Judy described. And what I do is I work directly with agents and presenters, agents, managers, or artists, and then our presenters, and come together to put together a tour, try to route it well throughout the Atlantic provinces, and make an offer to the agent or artist directly. Individual contracts are then done between the presenters or the venues, festivals, and the agents directly. They take it from there. So most of our artists come out of Contact East, which is our annual showcasing conference that Laurie talked about. And that is in late September. So all of those artists go into the block booking system that Judy talked about, and our presenters are then able to wish list them. So then I can see how many presenters in the back, sort of the back office of that, are interested in particular artists. And when we have 3 or more interested presenters, then we will work to create a tour. Again, it's working with presenters from all 4 provinces. And this really, for us on the East Coast, there are only a handful of larger presenters. So we have a lot of small presenters and festivals and small halls that are in our network. And it's very beneficial for them to book together to attract artists to the East. And it's also makes it more financially viable for the artists, of course, rather than just flying in for 1 gig or 2 gigs. So most of those artists come out of the conference showcasing. However, we do have a later in the year, we have a pitch session that we would normally get together in person with our presenters all together, usually in Halifax. And that's when the presenters pitch artists that they want to champion, like that Judy was talking about. So we use that pitch session for them to champion artists. Some will bring up artists again from Contact East that they really want to see tour and sort of repitch them. So there are many, many different artists that come out of that, and some of those are upcoming artists, or some of them are more seasoned artists with new projects that maybe not everybody is aware of. I think the only other thing I would say to the question about up and coming artists is that for Contact East, it is a juried event. Again, we have approximately 10 to 12 pitches. and around 25 to 27 showcasing artists, which are 15-minute showcases. And they are all juried. So they're all selected by a jury. And usually the jury will stay away from putting the same artists in that showcasing event year to year. So it would, if an artist maybe has a new project, it might be a couple of years, 3-4 years before they showcase again for Contact East. So it's not the same artist showcasing every year. So that's one way we don't have the same artists booking over and over again. Yeah.
I'm going to go to Kerry because we're kind of explaining the behind the scenes of the curatorial process. And as per the questions that are coming up in the public chat, this is only a tiny slice of how a festival or concert season is put together. And your guests today are going to comment on that. Kerry, you want to just dive in?
Yeah, just a couple of answers to some things. Yeah, it is a small part. I mean, it's sometimes I think people feel like that's how festivals are completely booked, and it's not. It's part of the curatorial process. So don't be scared by it. It can be a good thing if you're one of the artists that is in the block booking. But often block booking is kind of an overlapping process where it might be, say, Calgary Folk Fest might block book one artist with 4 different festivals and a different artist with 4 other festivals. And so that's how it isn't a carbon cutout kind of a situation. We might have 2 in common with Canmore and 3 in common with Edmonton and 4 in common with Winnipeg. And then there's all those overlapping. So you're going to look at festival lineups and see a lot of different artists. I look at festival artists and or lineups, and I often don't know a lot of the artists just because we're all trying to pay attention to so many things. And so just to keep that in mind, so it doesn't make the festival's carbon cutout. And in emerging artist question, depending on how you define that term, you could be part of a block booking scenario. If you present compelling music that's of interest to several presenters in a year, then you might be booked at several of them, and it might be by coincidence and might be by design. I use Basha Bulat as an example from probably quite an old example, maybe from 12 or 15 years ago, when we all kind of simultaneously woke up and realized that Basha was just an amazing artist, and she appeared on several festival lineups that year, and people may have thought it was block booking, but it was really more coincidence than design. The design part is if someone, maybe myself or someone else goes to a conference or festival and sees an artist they really love, and then they maybe talk it up among their peers, and then they actually end up becoming a champion, and they also book that artist. So I guess those are the 2 things that I would answer. The other one is a tough one, that because I don't think that there's not really an artist training ground. We're all trying to just do our best to do our jobs and hire artists that we think are really interesting, whether they're fresh or whether they've been around a long time. And we're not necessarily the training ground, except for if you come to a festival, you may learn some things, and you may that may be a good stepping stone.
Right, I'm going to ask David to jump in on this talent development thing, because Kerry was speaking from the advantage of the Calgary Folk Festival. The networks, we've heard, do have talent development programs, and it's certainly part of what we have at Mondial Montreal. David, can you look at some of the questions that we've seen coming in about access? And I guess the block booking itself is mostly for international artists, but there must be sharing of information between the network beyond the internationals.
Yeah, I think, our primary focus is on international artists that have sort of the highest barriers to come into the U.S., but we also look at artists that are based in the U.S. and artists that are regional, and we have a separate list, sort of a catalog of artists. We invite all of our participants to add their local artistry into this list, so that, like, if we need to, we're looking for a specific kind of sound or representation that's US based, we can look to this list and pull people from that. But also a lot of us, go to conferences and go to showcases all over the place. And so, artists that come to us that we suggest are artists that either are pitched to us from agents or people that we've actually seen live in person, and we've talked to the managers, and so we're connecting with the managers. And so, like, we've actually, through this have been able to debut a lot of artists in the U.S. and help put a tour together for them. So it's not, it's not, there is a lot of access is what I'm trying to say. And I think that while the focus is on international, a lot of emerging and a lot of US based and Canadian based artists do eventually end up performing at our festivals respectively.
David, there's a question that's come in that is something that we can all probably comment on regarding virtual festivals. And I'll just mention an organization here in Canada called Canadian Live Music Association, based out of Ottawa. Aaron Benjamin has been using that organization to bring presenters together to talk about how to cope with the virtual presenting, the impact of COVID on funding, et cetera. And people are asking, are people presenting virtual festivals? Certainly, Calgary and Hillside both presented on the same weekend. If you're tracking your favorite events, you will inevitably find that virtually all of them are going virtual and presenting festivals. So I should have put my face up there, dear. What am I doing? Sorry, folks. Click, pin video. Yeah, I was just answering something about the level of activity, and maybe we can all jump in. We've got about 15 minutes to address some of the questions that are coming in. And Valerie, you wanted to come back to a point in your process just to explain what how things work in the East. I lost you. There you go. Multi-genre. You mentioned just to clarify how your network works.
Yes, just to say, and the same as many of the other presenting arts networks, that were many and probably most of our presenters are multi-genre. So it isn't just music, and it is music of all kinds. So classical, world music, anything you want to classify as folk, rock, pop, everything, and as well as dance, theater, comedy, spoken word, really anything that you can think of. So, and usually for the block booking, it is professional artists and professional touring artists, I would say. So artists who know how to tour and are ready to do that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Judy to comment. Where did you go? There you are, Judy. On the process and access, talent development, I guess, because I know you and Cheryl have both commented privately here in our chat about that, and just the whole mystery of how curatorial process works.
It's and I think we were talking about it in the chat a little bit amongst ourselves. It really is finding a presenter who's going to champion your work. And those presenters can be found at conferences, festival events, showcase events, pitch sessions, and it's doing the research to check out the artists in the region that you want to tour to, check out their websites to see if there's a fit between what you have and what it looks like they've historically programmed, and then reaching out to them and trying to engage them. And it really often only takes one presenter to champion something for it to move through fairly easily. And that's, emerging work to, work for, established artists from perhaps other parts of the world. As in the case in Atlantic Canada, most of our presenters are multidisciplinary, which means it's dance, music, theater, all of that stuff. And so it doesn't just focus on one particular genre, and therefore they're looking at all kinds of things, which means that you've got to try and get your message out in front of them in a compelling way with as Kerry also mentioned in our chat, really, really awesome work. And if that is there, they'll find you and they'll move the project forward. it's what presenters do, I think, really, in our network, and I certainly know in Atlantic Canada the same way. It's what we do best. Bring forward lots of great ideas, and people work extremely collaboratively, and they listen to each other. So, find somebody to champion your work.
Judy, I'm going to jump in and comment from a Montreal perspective. We've had over 200 acts over the 9 years, and that alumni continue to be supported through different things that we do out on the road. And by definition, Montreal has been a talent development program. Any block booking that does occur changes from year to year, and sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4 years for a tour to come together. As much as there is always interest, sometimes we are competing with European festivals who have bigger budgets sometimes to attract interesting things. I mean, I know that happened with Tribe Called Red, for example, that a lot of people in Europe and North America wanted to present them all at once. There are artists like that. Going back to the virtual question, I'm not sure how much people are unaware of how much virtual is going on. It's extremely pervasive, and I don't know, Tom, if you want to comment on how the museums are coping with virtual, a virtual future, or your.
Sure. In brief, I can reiterate the sort of the main point. In museums, where the first business at hand is the visual arts collections and exhibitions, this pivot in the pandemic period has been less painful because we can display art and art-related materials online, as we have been doing even before this moment. It's been, of course, totally disruptive to performing artists. So, in a way, my sense is that art museums are getting their new footing now to forefront their exhibition schedule, which has also been turned to hash in this period, and then weaving back in performing art strategies where we can. Everybody's doing something a little different. There's a lot of online activity in this platform as well, ranging from somebody just playing music into their phone, from your phone to my phone, and some more ambitious things that are coming together that I'm hearing now as well, that are sort of museum-specific, internet-specific, and refining. Hopefully, it'll be a really creative summer and fall coming out of museums as well. I
just want to go to the talent development topic again, partly because Small World Music here in Toronto has a fantastic new program called Emergence, and the artistic director at Small World, Alan Davis, has developed, they too have a very large alumni. I believe it's on their newly launched website. And within the activities and the development here in Toronto through Small World Music, Emergence is I think there's about 30 artists involved in their talent development program, and it's not dissimilar to others. This conference itself is designed, of course, to assist artists and advance their careers. And this meeting of networks is unprecedented. All of these people sort of know each other, but there's never been a meeting of this group at any other conference that I know of. You're hearing about some of the affinities between these colleagues, but I invited this group together just because I saw common ground in their approaches, both artistically and in how they develop touring. This is all happening at a time when there really is no touring. Some agents and talent buyers are starting to look into the future. And Kerry, I'm going to ask you to comment about what happened with your season and how it. I've heard that many of the summer festivals basically have rolled their programs from this current summer over to next year.
Yeah, I mean, I've told all the artists that we hired for this year that I'm committed to booking them again next year, and we'll see what happens with touring schedules. We'll see if we can even do festivals next year. I mean, there's a lot of depressing stuff out there about how long this is going to last. I think quite a few other festivals are committed to that, which is probably good to hear for the artists that were involved, but it might be frustrating to hear for the artists that weren't involved because it feels like it delays them for another year in terms of narrowing their chances. But yeah, that's the case with us and a lot of people, and most of our fall concerts have moved to the spring, and then we've been doing a lot of digital programming and we've been paying people for that. The fees are definitely lower and our overall spend is lower on artists, but we hired 18 artists for our recent digital festival. We did that last weekend, so they were all paid, and all of our programs, all of our digital programs, people have been paid, and I believe that's the same with other festivals in our network. So does that answer the question, Derek? Yeah. I mean, the word discovery comes to mind because I'm hearing from artistic directors who want to hear a new artist, a discovery artist, and that's certainly part of what Global Toronto is offering. When we bring forward information about, just want to know who I'm asking to speak next, Cheryl. When Mondial Montreal comes out, we will be focusing very much on discovery talent because that seems to be where there's the most opportunity. As artistic director of Mondial Montreal, our application's closed. We haven't announced any selection. We will move the entire showcase program over to 21, but we will spotlight some of the discoveries that are in our program. Just going back to the virtual question, and we are going to wrap up in a minute or so. Cheryl, can you comment on the virtual reality here in Ontario and what you see?
There is a mix. There's certainly a lot of artists are doing things. I think our presenters are still struggling through it. There are a couple of what seemed like really promising, great ideas that did not come through. For the conference, we decided not to go virtual. We are going to create a catalog that will be on a website that people can search through that will include every artist that applied to showcase this year. For the conference in 2021, we'll be in Aurelia, and we're already planning at this point to figure there will still be issues with large gatherings, and so we will have virtual aspects to it at that time. But it's still, I think the part of the struggle is how do the artists get paid appropriately? And there's so much virtual content, and increasingly, I think people are getting tired. I'm hearing people say, I'm tired of it. I want a live performance. Right.
I'm asking my tech coordinator to go gallery so we can show all your faces all at once, but I'm not sure if we're going to do that. I want to thank all the participants today in this session explaining North American networks and touring. And I'm just reading a note from them. Okay, gallery. Let's see all those faces. You can follow up with me. There's some notes on the website and the brochure about these networks. If anybody wants to contact me to answer questions related to conferences and the session that we've had today, please get in touch. Derek Andrews at simpatico.ca and follow up with these fine folks. Thanks everybody for joining us today, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.